Welcome to the Evolution Show. I'm Johan Landgren. I hope you're great. Today I continue my conversation with Christopher Engman, founder and chairman of the Swedish startup Mind Storage, a company that develops energy storage solutions for the grid. And in the previous episode we talked about how this exciting technology works. Today we look at economic benefits, some of the challenges, and how mind storage can help store energy from renewables in the future. And next week I have another super inspiring guest on the show that you definitely don't want to miss. My next guest is a true pioneer in his field and among a handful of people in the world that for almost 8 years now has been running his house 100% off-grid using hydrogen generated from his own solar roof with power and heat all year round, even for the long Swedish winters. And by the way, I thought I was early getting a Tesla Model S back in 2014, but my next guest has been driving a Tesla Roadster since 2009. I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and if you do, help support the show and give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing. As always, stay ahead of the curve and stay electric. This is the Evolution Show. So how many, let's say, mines are we talking about, let's say, here in Sweden? Are we talking hundreds or potentially? Or?
So we've done simulations with scientists on this, and it's interesting, just to comment on something you didn't ask for, but it's interesting to highlight. So in the political debates regarding energy and energy storage, the tune is that if we introduce nuclear power, we solve all the problems. Let's not debate whether I'm for or against nuclear power, but what we see in our simulation is that the need for storage is exactly the same with or without nuclear, because the oscillations, the volatility in the net is very equivalent. And since nuclear power is on or off, it's not. I think it's kind of when we say plannable power, I think that's a kind of a marketing term, because nuclear power is on or off. It's not like hydro. Hydro, as you know, you can regulate up and down, and you can fit the exact need with hydropower. Nuclear power is binary. It's on or off. There are new generations that are kind of in the research state that hopefully come out that you can regulate, but that's not where we are now. So the need for storage is exactly the same with or without nuclear, which is pretty. I don't think people realize that, but it's actually quite interesting.
Yeah, I could just mention also, I mean, we don't have to go into pros and cons with the nuclear. You just have to, I mean, the fact is that we have a very short of time. If we're going to build this at the same rate that the expansion of renewables are coming into production, the generation of power from renewables, we can't wait 10-15 years for a nuclear plant. That's not going to work.
No, it's too slow. So you asked for a number of mines. There are quite a few to choose from. But we think around 10 medium-sized mines. So when we do the simulations, we can do the extreme to one end, extreme to the other end, and then it varies a lot, the number of mine storage that are needed for Sweden particularly. But the kind of median case is around 10 medium-sized mines to kind of cater for the Swedish needs, taking into consideration trading between countries and things like that, but around that, and our revenues are not just energy storage; it's also frequency regulation. So we have a few, and we also have. I think it will come to Sweden soon. We don't have it yet. So being able to charge for inertia, so svängmassa in Swedish. Yes. Since we're using these rotating masses, we can also sell inertia.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, okay. So let's say you have a mine in Sweden or elsewhere. What's the energy return on energy invested? I mean, do you looking at millions and millions of dollars and many years of down payment, so to speak? How do you look at this from your perspective, if you want to look at it from economic perspective and, of course, energy-wise?
Yeah, I think it has two angles. One is the efficiency. So if you put in 100 megawatt hours, or how many megawatt hours do you get back?
Exactly.
And that varies between 70 and 85%. And the reason why there is a variation, I give you some simple ones. So for example, if we design the mine storage to be super flexible, to really be able to take a lot of revenue streams like frequency regulation and others, we actually decrease the efficiency, but that doesn't mean we decrease the revenue. So from a financial point of view, actually going for a slightly lower efficiency, a round-trip efficiency, can be financially the financial winner because we're more flexible to the market. But if we focus entirely on the round-trip efficiency, we're rather at the 85%, but then we lose on the flexibility side. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I understand.
So, and also there's also a connection to the size. So a really small mine, there's certain like base losses that you have regardless of size, and there are certain variable losses, and the base losses compared to the size makes it less efficient the smaller it gets. So if we build really small mine storages, the round trip efficiency is on the lower end, and if we build larger, they're more on the higher end. It's kind of like economies of scale, but here like energy of scale or something. From the financial perspective, it varies a bit, but we're typically between 10-15% IRR, which is relatively high. So in what is it, like 8-9 years, we've kind of covered the Capex.
I mean,
there are a lot of moving parts, to be honest, in the business case, but we obviously only go for where the business case is very promising. But it's for that size of Capex, and we're normally looking at between, not for the small ones, but for the ones that are really interesting, we're looking at between 100, so between 20 million euros and 200 million euros in Capex per mine, and 200 is obviously on the
large, yeah. But for me, I mean, obviously, if you look at pumping technology and just pumps and so on, they last for decades and decades of decades, maybe 50 years, and so just to relate to that, for people might wonder then, okay, how much maintenance are we talking about per year, and perhaps how many people do you have to have at each site?
So let me comment on you said about the life length. So normally, as you say, these can last like 50-60 years. So you have a pretty long period where the technology lasts, and we're using proven turbines, proven pumps, etc. Our own tech is the software layer. The hardware we're sourcing from various players. If we though, let's say we're playing more on the frequency regulation side, the wear and tear on the equipment is higher. So in certain cases, we're looking at us in combination with other storage technologies to take the really like fast moving stuff, and we can do the medium and to long. Because these kind of very intensive frequency regulation is more tearing on the equipment, so it shortens the life length. Even though you increase the revenue, the total calculation can be less favorable. The maintenance, I'm the chairman of the company. There are certain details that I don't spend so much time on, and I must say that the maintenance part is in the head of Thomas and the team. So if I give you an answer, it will be too much of a guessing, so I shy away from that.
Yeah, I understand, but you obviously you have looked at it as an overall picture,
totally.
And it still makes economic sense. Otherwise, you wouldn't pursue it, obviously. So, but I just thought it can't be. I mean, just from a logical perspective, if you just compare a hydro plant today, you're not making a hydro plant, obviously, but it should be something similar in terms of very low maintenance.
We have recruited people from the hydropower industry. So we have those profiles,
Yeah.
very senior ones
Yeah.
in the staff.
Yeah.
So or
Yeah.
not totally
But
a lot of. So they're kind of hydropower is meeting the mining industry. So we have people from both camps in our company, and we also have people coming from the electricity trading camp as well. So we're kind of and then software. So there are 4 domains that are meeting in the mine storage case: software, hydropower, mining, and then electricity trading. So they're kind of those 4 competences. And then we just recruited from Svenska Kraftnät, the head of sustainability. She's now in our team as well.
Yeah, and you will obviously learn as you go. I mean, after you put up this first mine, you will see how this worked well, this would not. So yeah, but okay, I know we have already covered a lot of many things, but one more thing I would like to cover very briefly is just people might wonder, okay, you have a lake up there. How about during the winter time? So we're here in Sweden. That's when the need is the most, obviously, to store energy. So what can you say about the winter? Will it run, at the same capacity, or will you have some kind of?
It's actually no difference. Maybe there are extreme cases where it's frozen to the bottom, but then that requires really, really cold climate for a long time. But in our simulations, it doesn't affect the capacity depending on the season of the year. Here, I think regular hydropower are seeing more of an effect on that. But for us, at least in our simulations, we don't see any difference throughout the year.
No.
But it's a valid question.
Yeah, but great. Just finally, if you were look into the future, I always ask my guests this. Is really interesting. As you said, the change now is exponential. So if you just look a few years ahead, a lot of things are happening. But if we look 5 years ahead, then in this case, how many storage units approximately do you think you could have up and running? Assuming everything goes well and you don't end up with too much regulation and so on. You can mention maybe something about Sweden and perhaps something also for the international audience.
Yeah, I think the pace will be at 5 years from now is that we will be able to deploy 2 to 3 new mine storages per year. And our ambition is to increase that continuously, because after a while, when you've more and more proven the case and you've built all the know-how, it's more a matter of scaling with people, and also scaling, as I mentioned earlier, scaling with shareholder partnerships in other teams. I mean, we're quite open to that. Become a shareholder in another team that want to do the same thing, but they can use our software, our know-how, our failures and successes and anything. But 5 years is a pretty short time. And since you saw that it takes 4 years to get the first one live, I think in our plan, we have the goal in 5 years to have 2 or 3 live. But then we will also be at a higher pace 5 years from now. We'll be at 2 to 3 per year. And it becomes more and more of a machinery after a while.
Yeah, and always, we talked a little bit about Sweden, but if let's say you're in the US, you still see also that I guess there are a lot of mines, abandoned mines, old mines that you can potentially use.
The US is very favorable. We have discussions there with one big utility in a few other cases. The US is though, so I'm involved in that from the mega deal side. We're working with a few US cases, and the US is 13 different electricity markets, and more than half of the US market is regulated still, not deregulated. So it's a growing deregulation, but a lot of states are still regulated. So it's a bit different, and in some cases you also see they haven't split the operator of the grid with the actual energy generation and sales. So sometimes it's in the same. It's a bit different than here, but the fundamental need is 100% the same. And I would even say the fundamental need is bigger, because here we have managed longer thanks to having quite a high proportion of hydropower. Hydropower has been a blessing in the sky for Sweden and Norway and a few other countries. So we're a bit spoilt. But the US, so I've been doing a lot of stuff there, both the US and Canada. They have a lot of diesel and gas generators, a very high proportion. I can't remember the exact numbers, but I looked at this a few years ago, and gas and diesel engines and coal were representing far more than 50% of the market. So the good thing with those is that you can, not the coal plants, but the gas and diesel generators are as flexible as hydropower, but they are very fossil driven, obviously. But you see now, thanks to the Inflation Act in the US, there's a lot of push. Only in the last few months, is a tremendous ramp up of activity in the US. So there's a big drive there right now, and they're very aggressive.
Yeah. Fantastic. I really love what you're doing. And last guest I had, we talked about a company that is developing energy storage for container shipping. And actually my next guest is going to be a pioneer in hydrogen power for both private and commercial use in Sweden and elsewhere. So there are so many things happening.
Hydrogen is great. Like lithium ion, where it's a small space. So you need a very high energy density, like in a car, a truck, or like you said, in the shipping, or like the boat world. But then also hydrogen will be very big when it comes to hydrogen to X, not hydrogen as an electricity storage unit, but like to decarbonize cement and primarily steel, like with hybrid and H2 green steel and those, and a few other cases. Hydrogen is perfect. There are many. Actually, I'm not going to go into that now. But he is actually he has built his private house, and it's 500 square meters, and he's been running off grid for 8 years. Oh wow!
So he's extremely he's focusing on households and so on. For solutions with solar and anything, but I agree totally that transport sector and large units is probably the low-hanging fruit for hydrogen. But I also actually understanding from his perspective now that it's actually a huge potential even for houses as well, depending on how you build it. But so just to mention that, still I agree with you definitely. Okay, but thank you so much, Christopher. I look forward to follow up perhaps what you're doing in the future, and I think your contribution to energy storage is very inspiring. I think I encourage people to check you out. So finally, if someone would like to follow your work and learn more, how can they do so?
Well, first of all, they can check out mindstorage.com, and then gladly follow me on LinkedIn. So Christopher Engman, Christopher with CH and PH, and Engman with an E. Follow me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active there, both around mind storage, around various other green energy cases, and around mega deals. So I try to share a lot what I pick up from various parts of the world, and pretty generous with sharing those insights.
Yeah, I can agree. I know because I noticed that as well. So
thank you.
But I'll put in the links to Mind Storage and that in the descriptions below. And again, thank you so much, Christopher. It was very fruitful and very stimulating conversation. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It was my pleasure.
That was all for today, folks. I hope you liked today's episode. And if you do, help support the show with a thumbs up and consider subscribing. And be sure to tune in next week when one of the world's first to go 100% off-grid, combining hydrogen and solar energy, share how he has been living almost 8 years in a large modern house that is generating its own energy and stores it to run completely normal even during cold Swedish winters. We will go through his 500 square meters house and how his solutions now is attracting numerous large companies and people in Sweden as well as internationally. In part 2 of our conversation, we will talk about what his company is doing to help other companies, including schools and emergency rescuers, to install emergency power. His company is even helping farmers to go 100% off-grid, using hydrogen and solar power. I hope to see you next week.